Faisal Islam. Well, earlier I spoke to the Prime Minister and I started on the bad news on the economy. Prime Minister, can you rule out a triple dip?
Well, look, what we're doing is everything necessary to get the British economy back on track. And, I don't issue economic forecasts. That's all done independently now by the Office of Budget Responsibility. But their forecast, including other forecasts, even the disappointing IMF forecast today, is pointing to growth in the UK economy next year.
But not on anything like the scale you hoped.
It's been tougher. The road is harder than people thought it would be. That's partly because of what's happening in the Eurozone, the slowdown in the world economy, the additional inflation there's been in the British economy. But I do believe the economy is rebalancing. We've seen in the last 2 years 1 million net new jobs in the private sector. That rate of growth has been faster than necessary to soak up the inevitable loss of jobs in the public sector when you're having to make difficult decisions. The economy is rebalancing. Here we are in the West Midlands, the heart of the auto industry. We're now a net exporter of cars. We're making things again. We're selling things again. But it's tough and difficult. Accepted,
but the facts are changing. The Governor of the Bank of England has given you permission not to have to hit the national debt target, which you wouldn't be able to hit anyway. That fact has changed, and the facts have changed in terms of growth projections. So why aren't the facts changing in terms of what you're prepared to do about it? Where is the plan B that the IMF refers to?
Well, no, what the Governor of the Bank of England says is don't abandon your plans to bear down on public spending to make the difficult decisions. What the IMF say too is don't change your plans unless things get dramatically worse from where we are now. So they're both actually giving that advice. But what we need is not...
They say if things are slipping, you should in 2013 have a plan to do something differently. Have you got a plan?
Look, what we have is, I think, plan B, where B stands for more borrowing, more spending, more debt, the things that got us into this mess in the first place. That's not the right answer.
But what we need is more anyway.
Well, what we need is what I call Plan A++, which is you stick to the difficult decisions on public spending. We all know we've been living beyond our means, and it's good the deficit is down by 1/4 over the last 2 years, but we've got to add to that everything we can do to cut business taxes, to make it attractive to invest in here, to reform the planning system so it's easier to build, to make sure we prioritise infrastructure, to make it easier to employ people, to link Britain to the fastest growing parts of the world. All those things we're doing, and that is quite rightly business's wish list to make us one of the successful countries in the global race that we're involved in.
Let's look at infrastructure. I mean, you've talked a great deal about investing in infrastructure. That's a great engine of renewal and recovery. How many shovel-ready projects have actually had a shovel hit the ground? The answer really is almost none.
No, I don't accept that. There are things that have started since, the A11, for instance, which is actually a very big project that's been called on for many, many years.
But how many that you have said, get this thing done, and now it's happening? Give me an instance.
Well, I've given you an example of that.
But you are frustrated, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
You've had endless meetings with people.
I am frustrated that the decisions you take in government take long to implement, and that we do have in this country endless judicial reviews, very long consultation periods, whole lists of statutory consultees that have to listen to.
Hasn't gone through the Commons.
Except for we've taken the planning regulations from 1,000 pages to just 50. We're scrapping those Section 106 agreements so that builders can go ahead and build houses. We are taking a whole series of important steps that will make a difference to our economy.
Important statements about welfare cuts by the Chancellor here. Now, this is my Freedom Pass. This is my senior rail card. I'm in my 60s. I earn a full salary. I work a 5-day week. Why are you still allowing people like me to have cards like this?
Well, because I made a very clear promise during the election campaign. I looked absolutely squarely at the British people and I said, we are not going to take away the dignity and security of Britain's pensioners, and we're going to keep...
But we are to be held hostage to perhaps what was then a rash promise. No. If you're going to bear down on the poorer segments of society, you surely have to bear down on the Alan Sugars, on the Jon Snows and all the rest of it, who are perfectly capable of living without these devices.
Well, if you don't want to have them, you don't have to have them.
No, I'm saving my company money, thanks very much to you. I came here for £32 instead of 78 if I'd had to pay the full fare.
I'm very happy for you. But as I say, we made a very clear promise. I do think people who've worked hard, saved during their lives, should be entitled to live in dignity and security in old age. That's why I made those promises. We're going to keep those promises. But there's a lot of welfare changes.
People on benefits or on pensions who need these things. Yeah. But people who are in full employment, and after all, you were the first to say that retirement ages have gone on, people are living longer, working longer. we should adjust.
Well, we have adjusted. We've raised the retirement age. We've made difficult decisions about that.
But you're still giving
We've
the benefits.
reformed. Well, you keep going on about this point. I made a promise. I'm keeping a promise. You know, too often politicians make promises and don't keep them.
But one of the attractive things about the coalition is that you made lots of U-turns. What would be wrong with making a U-turn on that?
Well, I don't agree with that. I made a promise. I'm keeping a promise. But look, there are important bits of welfare we can reform. When we came to power, people like you were going to work, paying your taxes, and some of your taxes were going towards people who were claiming housing benefit of 40, 50, 60,000 pounds per house. Now, we've changed that, and I think it's right that we changed that. I want us to have a system of welfare where we always encourage work and always make sure that if you work more, that you actually keep more of that money. That's what universal credit will do.
Two last questions. The first, a 21-year-old graduate in Cumbria, looking for work, desperate to get work, jobs going in Manchester. Why don't you give him one of these things so that he can get down here free to look for that job? And then, of course, what will happen to his housing benefit? He would have been able to move here and perhaps get somewhere to live.
Well, I'll take that example absolutely head on. Okay, you've got a 21-year-old, you've got one who decides to leave college, get a job, probably won't be able to get housing benefit, will probably have to go on living at home with their parents, maybe
Can't
for
pick
many
up the job
years.
in Manchester,
Maybe for many years. On the other hand, that 21-year-old who doesn't look for work, who signs on, can get housing benefit, can get the flat. Now, what sort of signal does that send? If you're saying the working person can't have access to a home, but the person who chooses not to work can get the benefits.
But if there's no work in Cumbria, and he wants to travel to where there is work and you need job mobility to keep this economy going, there's not going to be any assistance to him to pick up that job.
Well, there's a huge amount of assistance because that's what the work programme is all about, is actually paying and training people to get them into work. But we have to look at the signals we send at the moment through the welfare system. Many of them are completely wrong. They're signals about not working rather than working. Prime
Minister, what a day to have a birthday.
Well, you don't pick it, but look, it's...
Have you got anything today that would perhaps refer to a birthday?
I have. Samantha is coming to take me out for a bull tea later on in Birmingham, so there'll be a bit of relaxation, I hope.
And on that claim from the Prime Minister that the A11 is one of the infrastructure projects where the shovels are at work, well, a little check on the Highways Agency website reveals that all that has happened so far is the removal of a few trees along the route. Work is not due to start until next January.